For the next hour, we're going to have a presentation on fossil fuels, and I suppose mainly oil and gas.
Only oil and gas.
Oil and gas, okay. It's a kind of last-minute change because there was supposed to be two speakers for this topic, and one of them had to cancel his participation at the last minute. So Daniel Chaussumier has kind of aggregated the two presentations, so you have the two names at the bottom of his first slide. Daniel Chaussumier has spent his whole, or at least a significant fraction of his career with Total, as you know, which is an oil and gas company. And his speech will be on facts and figures, basically dealing with oil and gas.
Thank you. How much time do I have, please? Not of 80 minutes.
No, 45 minutes, basically, before question.
Okay, thank you. So good morning. So I worked for Total until 23rd of December. Now I'm retired. And when I worked, I was in charge of making estimations of oil and gas resources worldwide, that is country by country, and not only the amount of resources, but also the pace at which the resources can be recovered. The result of this work is used by our strategy department in order to direct investments and choose places for exploration. Therefore, you understand that I am not allowed to divulgate all the results of this work, and I apologize for that. But it was agreed with Jean-Marc that I will focus more on the methodology than on the results themselves. So this is the outline of my presentation. So the purpose of the talk is mostly to describe the methodology used by the oil industry to predict the development of outputs. To set the scene, I will describe briefly the contribution of the fossil fuels in the global energy mix while recalling the peak oil theory. Then I will recap the various types of hydrocarbons accumulation. I will address the notions of recovery factor, of probability of success, and define the different categories of resources. After that, I will explain briefly how production profiles are derived through the use of numerical simulation for conventional fields and other techniques for unconventional. And to conclude, I would like to remind you of the impact of the shale revolution in North America, while emphasizing the uncertainty regarding predictions. So to set the scene, I prepared for you 3 quizzes. So it would be kind if you participate and try to answer my questions. And to motivate you, Jean-Marc is offering a 1,000 euro award to the one who is able to answer all the questions. First question, which is simple. It concerns the liquid hydrocarbon production in 2012. So, do you know which country was the first? Second? And third? Good. Next question is more difficult. So, which country has the highest ultimate resources of liquid hydrocarbons in 2 years ago? So I do not speak of reserves, I speak of resources. These are a much wider range than reserves. So, but we will start by the third. Which was third?
Canada, non,
Russia. Second. And first? Canada?
That counts as liquid?
Now, question about, now we move to gas. Which country has the greatest gas production potential? From 2000 to 2070, first and second are United States and Russia. Now, which is third? From 2000 to 2010, so this is history. Canada. Which country was third in 2013? Qatar. Which country will be third from 2020 to 2040? China. From 2050 to 2070. I heard the good Iran. Iran is a country with a lot of gas. For the time being, they do not export gas. So the gas is reinjected in the oil field to improve the recovery. It is also used for vehicles in Iran. But once the exploitation of the oil fields is finished, they will start to export the gas. And one interesting question, which country was fourth in 2000? So UK, and now it's finished. So you have not lost 1,000 euros. Okay, so I borrowed this slide from ExxonMobil, which it dates 2012, and it shows the evolution of the energy mix between 2010 and 2040. You have several bars, different colors, green for oil, gas, coal, nuclear, and the renewables. The first bar is 2010, and the second bar is 2040.
For the world?
Yes. So what you see is that in 30 years, the energy demand increases by 30%. 30% in 30 years. Why? Because there is an increase in population, and also the standard of living is improving. About more than 90% of the increase is from emerging countries. Mostly China, first it's China, then India, then Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. What is interesting also to see is that oil remains the number one, but there is a big increase in gas demand. Gas demand increases by 60%. And it replaces coal in the second place. Coal, actually, the demand for coal will continue to increase until maybe 2025. India will become the first coal importer. And after that, it should decrease. This is the part of the nuclear and the part of the renewables. I forgot to mention something. So my presentation is the merge of two presentations. One, the one I did myself, and you have a footer with my name. This is I did, and one done by Roland Vialy from Institut Français du Pétrole, and I put a red footer to. So if you see a slide with a red footer, do not ask a too complicated question, otherwise I will not be able to answer.
Can I ask a question on this one?
Yes?
How do you estimate the numbers for the
renewables, for example, or nuclear?
This is this is a study made by ExxonMobil. So you asked me how this is.
Yeah, where did it come from? Do you have an idea? It's just numbers?
No, I don't know what methodology they followed to derive this. I cannot.
Well, they have.
So this is from Roland Viali. This is a description of the three scenarios which are used by which are considered by the International Energy Agency. The first scenario, current policy scenario, means that we continue. We do not we continue the present situation. We do not do efforts to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. The new policy scenario is the central scenario. In this scenario, the countries, through the conferences and congresses like Kyoto, Copenhagen, there will be one in France in 2016. They managed to find agreements in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. And the 450 scenario is the most optimistic scenario, which 450 means that we limit the CO2 emission to 450 ppm. And this 450 ppm CO2 concentration, if we can limit this, we will limit the global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. In this scenario, which is less optimistic than this one, we limit the global warming to 3.6 degrees Celsius. Most people think that this is not realistic, unachievable. The current concentration of CO2 is just 400 ppm. And it was 300 ppm, less than 300 ppm before the revolution, industrial revolution. But in the past, at the formation of Earth, it was 30%. After 3 billion years, it came down to 3%. And then it continued to decrease to 300 ppm. So 0.03%. And now it is at 400 ppm. So now, so this is the curve done by the International Energy Agency in the 3 scenarios for the world primary energy. So you see that in order to reach the 450 ppm, the energy demand should level off like this. But in the new policy scenario, it is in between the two cases. This is another way to present the figures. Now we are in the new policy scenario, and this is between the dates are between 2010 and 2035. So here there is an increase in oil, coal, gas, renewables, and nuclear. And what is important to say is that the proportion of hydrocarbon in the global energy mix, it is still in this scenario 51%, more than half. So this is the same kind of presentation, but only for oil. In the 450 scenario, there is a decrease in the oil demand. And I think there is the... Okay, oh yes, I forgot to this was the question. Will liquid hydrocarbons resource be sufficient? So this leads me to present the, the peak oil theory. This peak oil theory was made by a guy called King Hubbert, who was a geophysicist in Shell company. And his theory is, this is the base of resource recovery. According to this theory, the shape of this curve, which gives the amount of production per year, the shape of this curve is symmetrical. This means that once you have recovered half of the total reserve, the production should decline. This is the base of this theory. Before I continue, this is I took this slide from Roland, and I think that it is interesting. It is about the estimation of reserves. The OPEC countries, I think the current production is 90 million barrels of oil per day, and the OPEC share is about 40%. This means that the OPEC produces about 36 million barrels per day. And you know, in the OPEC, they have a system of quota. The 36 million barrels production is distributed between the countries proportionally to their reserves. Therefore, each country has an interest of claiming for a higher value of reserves. And this is an example. You see, for instance, this is Saudi. They increase their reserves just to have a greater quota. The message behind this is that we cannot trust the OPEC countries for their reserve estimation. And we do not trust them, but because we think that all their estimations are too much, because they are motivated for this to get a greater quota.
Do you think that the reserve of other countries are more reliable?
For other countries, yes, because no. Even for the OPEC, we know that we cannot trust them, so we have our own estimation. The problem is it is more difficult in the OPEC countries to get the data needed to get a reasonable estimation. For other countries, maybe it is easier to get the information in order to assess reasonably the resources. So this calculation was made by Roland. I think it is interesting to show the result. What Roland did is estimation of the peak oil according to Hubbert theory. That is, once you have produced half of the resources, the production will start to decline. You have reached the peak oil is the time when you have produced half of the resources. So if we based the calculation just on the proven reserves, which are this figure, 1,500 billion barrels, billions is 10 to the power 9. Then okay, it is 2000 and the peak is at 2017. If you add additional reserves made, for instance, by enhanced oil recovery or new fields which are not already in production, then the peak is in 2023. If you add the it is not the discovery, it is the exploration, that is fields which have not been discovered yet, then it is 2028. And if you add up again the unconventional hydrocarbons, I will come back later on this and explain you what it is, then the peak is delayed to 2035. So, I finished the first part of my presentation, which was the purpose of which was to set the scene. Now I will explain more in detail how we we made our own estimation of the oil and gas resources. So, recap on the various oil and gas fields. What I call conventional oil and gas field is, this is the definition, the hydrocarbons generated by maturation of the source rock have migrated into a reservoir, which is a porous and permeable medium, and accumulated in a geologic trap. The words which are important is maturation, reservoir, permeable, and geologic trap. My definition of unconventional is that one of the important condition is missing. For instance, no migration. So this concerns the residual hydrocarbon in the source rock. Or no geologic trap. Basic centered gas, oil sand, methane hydrate. Or no maturation, oil shale. I will explain this with this cartoon. This is a cross-section. And in green, here, there is what we call a source rock. A source rock is a formation which contains biomass, biologic material. There are two kinds of biologic materials from either terrestrial origin, it can be trees, leaves, and this biologic material, when it is dead, it goes on the ground, it is overlain by other sediments, and then the depth of burial increases, and when the depth of burial increases, the temperature increases, and the pressure increases, and then this biogenic material transforms. When it is from terrestrial origin, trees or leaves, it transforms into coal. When it is from marine origin, that is algae or plankton, it transforms into oil or gas. Okay, so in this case, the source rock contains biologic material of marine origin, and it will transform into oil and gas. This is important. It is the maturity window. For this transformation to take place, we need a sufficient temperature, which is about 100 degrees Celsius. And when we reach, so the temperature increases with depth, this is the geothermal gradient, and when we reach this temperature, there is a transformation of the biologic material, which we call the kerosene, into oil and gas. And this transformation, this reaction is a big reaction. There is a lot of pressure and increase in temperature. This is like an explosion. And the hydrocarbons are expelled from the source rock. This is also called the source rock. They are expelled. And if they encountered a reservoir, in yellow, the reservoir which is medium porous and permeable, so they get into it and they migrate because of the buoyancy, the density of the oil and gas element are lower than the density of the medium, it is water before the migration. So they go towards the surface. If they do not encounter any obstacle on their way, they reach the surface and they go to the atmosphere. If it is gas, they go to the atmosphere. If it is oil, that's very bad because you have seeps on the ground, and this oil, when if it comes to the surface, there is a degradation. It is attacked by the bacteria which eat a part of the oil, and there is a big degradation, and you have something like a grease. And the oil sands of Canada are made like this. If by chance it encounters a trap during its trip, it will accumulate in the trap, and it will keep its good properties. So the conventional exploration of hydrocarbons, which started in the 20th century, it was to find those accumulations. So on this cartoon, you can see that it is difficult to find conventional fields like this, because you have to find the trap. It's not easy to find the trap. Otherwise, the new way to produce hydrocarbons now is to go back to the source rock, because not 100% of the hydrocarbon generated were expelled. The proportion of hydrocarbon expelled could be as low as 30%. So 30% of the hydrocarbon generated under the maturity window, 30% have migrated there to find traps which are difficult to find, and 70% are remaining there. So if you can unlock these hydrocarbons, so the shale gas and shale oil exploitation that started recently in the United States is targeting this the residual hydrocarbon is the source rock. I can speak also here about the source rock outside the maturity window. This is what we call the oil shale in English, or the schiste bitumineux in French. This is a source rock which is not matured, so it has not transformed into hydrocarbon. But it is possible to exploit it. There are two ways. One way is to mine it like coal. You bring it to the surface with mines or quarry. You put it in an oven, big oven, 1 hour at 500 degrees, and then you get hydrocarbons. This is one way. This is the only way which is used on an industrial basis. There are pilots to do the transformation in situ. You drill wells, you inject gas, you burn gas in the ground just to increase the temperature, or you can inject electrolyte and make electric current to increase the temperature, and then you can get oil and gas from this. So, and the resources related to the exploitation of unmature source rock are enormous. This is the resource triangle. This is a concept which is interesting. The idea is that there is a small quantity of high quality reservoirs or fields, and there is a big quantity of poor quality reservoir. This means that when the difficulty to exploit increases, fortunately the quantity is more important. So small quantity of good quality and small quantity of high quality and high quantity of small quality. This is the concept triangle. So this is an example of what I said before about the triangle. The source is International Energy Agency 2013, and this concerns only the liquid fuels. you have here the quantity remaining technically recoverable oil resources in billion barrels, and this is the production cost. Okay, so this part is what we already produced, about 1,200 billion barrels. And this is the production cost between $2, this must be the Middle East, to about, I don't know, $30. Okay, so we have produced this. This is finished. So these are what remains. So first, Middle East and North Africa. North Africa is Libya and Algeria. So there is still quite a high quantity, and with a price between, let's say, $5 or no, to $25 per barrel. These are the other conventional oil. So large, again, a large quantity, but with a wide range in the price, up to $70 per barrel. CO2 EUR. It is possible to increase the oil recovery by injecting CO2. And this is the stakes. And also the price is up to $70. Then you have EUR, but without CO2. You have this quantity. This is the Arctic. Extra heavy oil and bitumen, which concerns mainly Canada and Venezuela. This is light tight oil. This is so it was the oil, what I explained before, the oil extracted from the source rock. Ultra deep water. So you see the price now is about $100 per barrel. Kerosene. Kerosene is what I explained just before, the maturation of the source rock. This is GTL conversion of gas to liquid, and this is CTL conversion of coal to liquid. So you see that there is, so it is the resources actually are 8,000 billion barrels minus what we have already produced. So it is still quite a big quantity, but the price for these resources to be economically producible, it must be at least $100. Recovery factor. The recovery factor is the proportion of the accumulation that can be extracted from the ground. For a conventional oil field, it is from 5% to 60%, average 30%. For a gas field, it is from 20% to 90%, average 75%. For shale oil and shale gas, for shale oil it is 7% in the ASERVI. I will explain later what is the ASERVI. And for the gas, it is about 20% in the ASERVI. The important definition is reserves and resources is the accumulation times the recovery factor. Main factors affecting the recovery factors of conventional fields. First, reservoir properties, which are the porosity, the permeability. Permeability expresses the easiness of the flow inside the medium, and the geometry, of course, the thickness, the deep compartmentalization. Second set of parameters are the fluid properties, especially the hydrocarbon saturation and initial pressure, the compressibility, very important, and the viscosity. And last set of parameters are, of course, the economic conditions, capital expenditure, the cost of the well, surface facility, evacuation system, OPEX, the operating cost and royalties, and the gas price. Recovery mechanism for conventional fields. If the compressibility of the fluid, the hydrocarbon is high, for instance gas, it is very simple, it is natural depletion. You drill a well inside the reservoir, and you open it, and by expansion, it is the gas will come. If it were perfect gas, if the initial pressure is 200 bars and you bring the pressure down to 100 bars, you recover half of the gas in place. Unfortunately, the hydrocarbon gases are not perfect, and when you drop the pressure from 200 to 100, you recover not 50%, but 30%. But of course, you can reduce the pressure much lower than 100 bars. For instance, the Lac field in France, it started at very high pressure. It was, I think, 700 bars, and the pressure was dropped very, very, very low, and the recovery factor of the Lac field was, I think, more than 90%. If the compressibility is low, it will not work like this, because oil, if you take oil, it has a much lower compressibility than gas. If you drop the pressure in an oil field, the expansion of the oil is very small, and so the recovery is very small. So there is the other way to recover the oil is you need to push it with either water or gas injection. If you have the chance of a high aquifer activities, the aquifer does the job for yourself, and you can get a good recovery factor. In case of low mobility, which can be either low permeability or high viscosity, so you have different means, like steam injection. For instance, if you have a high viscous oil, you inject steam. This has the effect of increasing the temperature and so reducing the viscosity. Low permeability, hydraulic fracturing, and horizontal drilling. So this is the sketch showing what is the production with an active aquifer. And I have a second one. This is the case of high viscosity. So this is this pattern is called the SAGD, steam-assisted gravity drainage. You have two horizontal wells parallel. In the well which is below, you inject steam, which penetrates the reservoir and reduces the viscosity of the oil in place, and then the oil, which is less viscous, it goes down and is recovered by the well which is above. So this process is used in Canada, for instance. How to derive the recovery factor for a conventional oil field? So it depends, of course, on available data. But if sufficient data is available, first phase is the construction of a geologic model with a fine grid to capture the reservoir heterogeneity and also the structure and compartmentalization which were defined using seismic data. Second step is construction of a dynamic model, which is made by upscaling the geologic models and made through the analysis of well test and production data. Third step is the validation of the dynamic model. So you try to match the production history. There are a lot of parameters that you do not know very well in your model. And you have to tune those parameters in order that your model reproduces the well performance. The development FW is the water cut, and the GOR, this is the ratio between oil and gas production. And once you have done this, you can do predictions. You input the actual production constraints, which could be the wellhead flowing pressure and an economic cutoff, and then you do prediction. There is a rule of thumb which says that if you are able to reproduce with your model production history of about 20 years, the predictions that you make with the same model are reliable for 20 years. But in practice, We have a very short production history and we make predictions. We do not respect this ratio. So this is a cartoon to explain. So seismic processing and imaging helps you in defining the shape of the reservoir and also the possible presence of faults. So you create an image of the subsurface. This is a geologic interpretation which allows you to know to determine the shape of the reservoir, and then you create a graded model for flow simulation. So this is to show the improvement in the work. This was in 1951. This was the equation used in 1951, so very simple. Now, this is the equation. I will not comment it, it's more complicated. And this is a model with 3 phases and multiple components. And also, this is the improvement on the power of the computer. Now we are able to, in 1951, a model with 10 cells was a big model. Now we are in reservoir models, we have 1 million cells. So it allows you to get better predictions. So for instance, this is a kind of result that you can get from a model. This is initial oil saturation in a field. So here you have the water and here you have oil. Here you have the wells. So this was at start. After some years of production, this is the final oil saturation. And if you look at this, you can see that there is a place here where you have quite high oil saturation. So this can lead you to say, I should have a well here in order to improve the recovery from the field. So this is how we work. Now, so to build this model, you need, of course, a lot of data. Now I will explain how we do for undiscovered oil field. For undiscovered oil field, of course, we have no data at all. We cannot match production history since we have not even discovered the field. So how do we do? So we use typical production profiles. I will give you an example. And the resources are an assumption. It is not the result, it is the assumption. We suppose that in a given country or in a given part, we estimate that the exploration resources are 2.25 billion barrels. We think that we will discover 2.25 billion barrels in a certain area. And we assume also that we will discover 15 fields. 15 fields totaling 2.25 billion barrels. And we assume also that the maximum size of a field is 250 million barrels. And also, last assumption is the time frame to complete the exploration profile will be 30 years. So we assume that the potential of the basin is 2.25 billion barrels, that we will discover these 2.25 billion barrels in 30 years, and it will be done by 15 fields, the maximum size of a field being 250. These are the assumptions. And I will show you how we derive the profile. So first, this is, I assume that there are 3 kinds of fields. One big, one small, and one medium. And the big one has these resources. The medium one has these resources. So it was 250. Huh? I don't see if you can read. So I said that the maximum was 250. So you have 250, and the medium 150, and the small 100. And this is the number. There were 15. Huh? So there are 3 big one, 4 medium one, and 3. Yes, okay. But and also 30 years. And we assume that we begin by finding the big one and the small one and the end. So this is the assumption regarding the pace at which we find the fields. Pardon? Oui, d'accord. Oui. So these are the 3 fields, the 3 profiles for the medium, the big, and the small. First, you see, if you think of a bird, it is not symmetrical. You have a ramp-up phase, a plateau phase, and a decline phase. But when you combine, this is the combination of this one and the one I showed before with the... It is strange, but it is like... Okay. It looks like the bird. Now for the shale gas field. So I have to go faster. So how do we do for a shale gas field? So we start by mapping the source rock. There is a cutoff on depth and thickness. If the source rock is too deep, we do not think it is possible to exploit it because it, of course, the quality of the rock is too bad. And the price of the well would be too high. A maturity map to determine the oil and gas windows, I showed you before. Calculation of the hydrocarbon in place density. Elaboration of a development plan. So the parameters, the important parameters are the wells count and the layout, taking topography into account. Because it is not possible to drill in urbanized area, in national parks, lakes, and so on. And the predictions. The predictions are it's a combination of a type curve and a drilling planning. So now I come to our survey. So this is a horizontal well drilled in a source rock, and there are this is the casing. And we do holes in the casing, and then we will inject water inside the holes, which breaks the formation. And then it through all these fractures, the hydrocarbons remaining in the source rock can be produced. Okay, so the ASRV is this volume of reservoir which has been created. We create the reservoir. For instance, horizontal drains are from 1 kilometer to 1.5 kilometers. They are up to 16 frac stage, and it's to create this reservoir. This implies to inject 16,000 cubic meters of water and 1,500 tons of sand. So this is you need a lot of material to do this. The well is there, but this does not last very long. The drilling can be 3 weeks, and the fracturation can be 2 days. And after this is finished, you get this. So the footprint is the well is there. The footprint is not that important, especially now we are doing what we call pad drilling from one single location. With the horizontal drilling, you can reach a lot of surface, but this cannot be done, of course, in an urbanized area or in places where it is the recovery from the source rock is like mining. If you cannot put a well, you cannot recover what is below. It is not in conventional. You can drill a well and drain hydrocarbons 5 kilometers apart, but with this you cannot. You produce where you can drill. Okay, how do we derive the production profile? So it is quite simple. This curve, this show you the number of wells that you can drill each year. So each bar corresponds to 1 year, and here you have the number of wells that you can drill. This is the production profile of one single well. So the quantity produced each year. It may be the shape could be surprising, but because you know that in this kind of wells, when you start production, you have a very high rate, and the rate decreases very, very fast. So you may question why is the second year higher than the first year. The reason is that the wells are not drilled on the 1st of January. So when you say that in this year you will drill 1,000 wells, they are not. They do not start all on the 1st of January. Some start in January, some in March, some in November.
5 minutes for the questions at least.
So how much time is left?
It's 7 minutes.
Normally 10 minutes, but
Okay.
We have to go to the
Yes. Okay, so we assume that the first year the well starts on the 1st of July. This is why the first is. So when we combine the two, we get this profile.
The time scale, can you indicate a few years? The time scale for one.
This, I think it is.
The curve up there, yeah. That's a few years.
No, this is 1 year. Each bar corresponds to 1 year.
1 year, okay.
So this was done by Roland Viali, and it is basin modeling to evaluate the light tidal potential in the Paris basin.
maybe.
I go fast. I go just to the fortunately, okay, to the conclusion. Okay, so this is the actual production history from the Paris basin. If this were true, it could continue like this. Honestly, I don't believe it. Uncertainties, this is important. The uncertainty is twofold. Will the development project be carried out? If so, what will be the outcome? So first, will the development project be carried out? So here we come with some definition. If the field is already on production or close to startup and the economy is proven, we speak of reserves. If the field is under evaluation, we speak of contingent resources. If the field has not been discovered yet, we speak of prospective resources. And the PS, probability of success, allows you to calculate the risk resources, which are the technical resources times the PS. For the reserves, PS is 100%. Contingent resources, it is between 50 and 100. And for prospective resources, it is between 10 and 50. What will be the outcome? There are a lot of parameters which can have an impact on the outcome. So we are making some kind of statistical analysis. What we call the 1P or P90 or Q10 is the outcome which has 90% probability to be exceeded. 2P is 50%, and 3P is 10%. For resources, we are not using the same terminology, but mini, mod, maxi, or low, best, high. What is used in the profile are the 2P reserves and the risk mod resources, that is the technical resources times the PS. This is what we are using to determine the production profile. So this is an example. This is oil production profile. So here you have the field on production. You have different shades of green. The darkest is the most sure. So field on production is this. So the decline rate is about 6% per year. Here I adapt the field for which the development was approved. These are the contingent resources. This is the EUR, that is the additional resources that we can get by increasing the recovery factor, doing some complicated work. And this is the exploration. Exploration is for the field that we have not discovered yet. So what we can, and here you have a peak, and at the time of the peak, 68% of the production, that is two-thirds, comes from field on production and development approved, that is the reserves. And 1/3 is from contingent resources, and only 9% is for exploration. This is the same graph, but where I distributed the production by the type of fluid. So this is the crude. This is the NGL, that is the fluid associated with the exploitation of gas. And these are the unconventional. It's finished?
Well, we should be in the restaurant in 5 minutes, and I suggest
Okay.
3 minutes.
So, okay, I can...
Let's take one question.
One slide on sensitivity, and then one question, and then we leave.
Okay. So, as I said before, the base case is based on 2P reserves plus most mode risk resources. Sensitivity case. So, I will show you first the base case. Now, sensitivity. If all the projects are delayed by 2 years, I get the yellow curve. Now, if the exploration potential is divided by 2, I get, in addition to the previous one, I get the blue. And last point is if the unconventional potential is divided by 2, then I get this one. So I go from this one to this one. And I have an optimistic case, which is about. So this is the kind of work that we do to try to have a window for the... this one, last one. I made it specially for you. This is the USA historical oil production. So it was like this, and up to 1970. Then, if you believe in Hubbert, you say it will be like this. Okay. Now, after that, after this point, the oil price increases, and they did EUR, the CO2 injection. They made discoveries in Alaska and Gulf of Mexico. And then the curve goes like this. So if you extrapolate, it may be like this. But now, shale oil and well shale gas, and it goes up again. And in 2014, it reached the same level that it was before. So this is to explain that predictions are difficult to make. So, okay, I can stop.
Okay.